Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for spending some Sunday with us. We promise that we have something very wonderful in store for you. My name is Dorothy Hassan, and I'm the Director of Education here with My Project USA. And welcome to our Black History Month virtual event, Not Just a Month. Just team notes, we toiled for a long time about what we should do and what we should be presenting. And after careful counsel with one of our very own presenters, Zubaidah, we came up with the idea that we wanted to put information out there. Black History Month is a month that is celebrated on the calendar every single year, but there's so many of us as adults and our children who don't know what Black History Month really means, beyond it being a month where you get the special ditto and extra credit for this old person. So we wanted to go beyond that with this event. And I really think that with the lineup we have today, we did a really good job. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. We do have an agenda. You should have gotten the agenda with your, let's see, once again, with your invitation, but let me show you again right here, our thank you for joining us. And this is our agenda for today. So you'll see that we do have a speaker scheduled for every hour. Every speaker is probably not going to take an hour, but I know we all know that sitting in front of a Zoom can be tedious. So we want to give you enough time to, actually get up, get a snack, redo your coffee, and come back. If it was up to me, we would have had the whole regular old hotel room, Starbucks coffee for free, and cheap fruit. But this is what we have to deal with. And I thank you so much again, everyone, for joining us. And allow me to introduce our first speaker. Okay, today our first speaker is Zubaida Aulani. She is what I would like to say, she may tell you otherwise, a personal friend. She's been in education for 15 years. That's a long time. That's a long time of teaching people and sharing with people and figuring out how best to reach the minds and souls of the people that we have to reach. That's all I want to share about her. She's worked with all types of powerhouses. She's worked in higher education. She's worked in elementary ed. She's worked with the NAACP. She's done research. We are humbled that she accepted our invitation this morning, and I turn it over to her.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's having a wonderful Sunday. I know it's a little early, it's 10 o'clock, but I'm so glad that you're all here with us. So my portion of this amazing setup that My Project USA put together is I'm just going to begin off with the basics of exactly what is Black History Month and why is it important? Like, why do we celebrate it? Why do we acknowledge it? And so I'm just gonna start from that perspective. So I'm just going to share a PowerPoint with you guys. So Black History Month and why you need to celebrate it. Often when we think of Black History Month, we think of just a celebration for African Americans, but that is not the case. So just a quick few notes about myself and when I'm speaking. So why I use one word versus another. So often the words like Black people and African Americans will be used interchangeably, and then also the way that it's spelled will be used interchangeably too. For myself, when I am talking about Black Americans, or Black people, and I use a capital letter B, for me, that is denoting that we are direct descendants of enslaved Africans. And often we're unable to trace our direct lineage. When I refer to Black people with a lowercase b, It's because there are Black people all over the world, of every ethnicity, of every hue. Denotes that there's a hue of one's complexion. Whether you're in India, in Japan, in South America, there are Black people everywhere. And then African Americans, that phrase is often used interchangeably, and sometimes I might use it as well. But this phrase can and is often now used interchangeably to describe descendants of enslaved Africans, but it can be also used to describe first and second generation immigrants of African countries. Even white South Africans are now defined as African Americans. But often when we think of that term, that is not a term that we're really thinking of. And then the terms slave versus enslaved people. Slaves were when we use the word slaves instead of enslaved people, it often describes them as a group of people that were just thought of as commodities. And it states that it is their inherent condition, like they will always be slaves. But when we use phrases like enslaved people, it's a group of people whom slavery was forced upon them. Slavery was their circumstance, and it's not their identity. It does not define who they are. So through this presentation, when you see the word enslaved people, that's who I'm referring to. All right, so quick question. Like Dorothy said, I am a teacher by nature, so I believe in engagement. When the phrase Black History Month comes to mind, what is it that you think of? So as Dorothy said, I've been in education for many years. And often when it comes around that time for Black History Month, just from a professional standpoint, I am not a history teacher, but somehow I often get thrust upon that role of becoming a history teacher. And so often when I question students or I see classes taking beginning during the month of February, and they want to highlight Black History Month, they kind of focus on four things. They focus on Martin Luther King, he was good. Malcolm X, not so good. They focus on slavery. They focus on civil rights. And sometimes Jim Crow, if you're lucky, they'll focus on that. And then they'll focus on, with civil rights, they'll focus on how Rosa Parks was some old woman who sat on a bus because she was tired. And then the last thing lately that I've seen in the last maybe 4 to 5 years is now a focus on Barack Obama being the first Black president. And then of course now we have Vice President Harris. So I'm assuming that will become a part of it. But Black History Month is so much more than that. And our history is so much more richer than the 4 or 5 bullet points that it is broken down to often. And often when we talk to adults, that's kind of what they break things down to as well, or those kind of facts. But exactly where did Black History Month originate in? So there was a doctor by the name of Carter G. Woodson. He was a historian, he was an author, and he was the second African-American to earn a PhD at Harvard University. He developed the idea that later became Black History Month. And so for this reason, he is often called the father of Black history. So his parents were enslaved, they were enslaved people, and he thought that there was a need to highlight the history of Black people in 1915. Because he noticed that there was a lack of information on the accomplishments of Black people available to the public. So he was also a co-founder of an organization called the Association for the Study of Negro Life. And in 1926, this organization declared the second week of February as Negro History Week. And I'm sure other presenters are going to kind of go into more depth, like Dr. Porter, as far as the definition of like Negro and Black and colored, and all of those were often used to describe the same people that I'm describing, which are Black people or, descendants of enslaved people. And so when this week was created, it recognized the contributions of African Americans or Black people to the United States. So prior to the creation of Negro History Week, a few people actually studied Black history, and it wasn't included in any school curriculum, which is also kind of telling as of now, because often it's still not really thrust into school curriculums. It's kind of given as an extra thing that teachers can do, but they can opt out of it. So it's not even something that's really forced on teachers. It's often not in their curriculum, but it wasn't even introduced. And so, why the month of February? I know often people state, it's the shortest month of the year. Why was February even chosen? And the reason why it was chosen, initially, like I said, it started as Negro History Week, and it was the second week of February. And the reason why that particular week was chosen is because in that week, it included the birthday of both Frederick Douglass, who was an abolitionist who escaped from slavery, and then also former President Abraham Lincoln, who was formerly known to have abolished slavery. And so this week-long event officially became Black History Month in 1976. So when we really look at it, we're really not far away from when it actually became a month. And this was also during the height of the civil rights movement, that, it was more of a focus on Black history. And so former US President Gerald Ford expanded the week into what we know as a federally recognized month of Black history. And the reason why he decided to order this to become a month, he said, in quote, to honor the too often neglected accomplishments of Black Americans in every area of endeavor throughout our history. So since then, in the United States, Black history has been celebrated in the month of February. And surprisingly, for those of you that don't know, Black history is not just celebrated in the United States, it's also celebrated in Canada and in other parts of the world too, just to kind of acknowledge all of the things that we have done as Black people. And so Black History Month is a time to focus our attention on the contributions made by and of African Americans to the United States. Often we don't notice how much we've actually contributed to history. If you're talking about W.E.B. Du Bois, like we are more than just Martin Luther King. When we're talking about science, we have Mae Jemison, who is, in our lifetime. We have George Washington Carver. When we're talking about government, we have Fannie Lou Hamer, of course, Thurgood Marshall. Now we have Vice President Harris. If we're talking about medical, we have Dr. Charles Drew, we have Henrietta Lacks. When we're talking about arts and culture, we have Dapper Dan or Josephine Baker or Sidney Poitier. When it comes to sports, we have the Negro Baseball League, plus all of the amazing like LeBron James and Michael Jordan. And then, of course, when it comes to the military, we have the Tuskegee Airmen. Like we have all of these aspects of our culture and of the historical changes that we've made to the fabric of the United States that we often aren't credited for. And those are just the ones we know about. Often there are so many Black men and women that have contributed to our lives that we just don't know about, or we don't have information on, or they're just not widely known and widely publicized. And so to honor all Black people from all periods of history, from the African Americans or present before the onset of the enslavement of Black people first brought over from Africa in the earliest 1700s to African Americans living in the United States today, we use this time to celebrate all of the accomplishments that we have made, all of the strides that we have done in this country in which we live. So why is Black History Month important to me? Why is it important to Black people? Like I said, for many decades, much of the history, the contributions and the accolades made by Black people have been hidden, or they're really not well known. There are so many contributions that we don't necessarily know of. Like, for example, before that movie came out, Hidden Figures, most people had no idea what was going on in the background of the moon landing. And like in so many other cultures, most Black households, we invest in our children by instilling in them with the knowledge of the past, as well as the present achievements made by Black people. So it's important for our children to know not only what we came from, what we accomplished, but what they're able to accomplish themselves and the greatness that they're descendants of. And when we show that they are descendants of greatness, we not only begin before the enslavement of our ancestors, But that continues on during the enslavement of our ancestors. That continues on during Jim Crow. That continues on during the civil rights movements, and it continues now. Like, we continuously see the importance that we have, even now in the 21st century, and the strides that we're making when it comes to the history and the well-being of America. So I have I've given this talk quite a few times, especially in the last like 5 or 6 years, about Black history. And often I will have non-Black people of color who will ask me, during question and answer, why is this important? Why do I need to know this? How does it even benefit me? So I found this really good video. So I just want to kind of play it really quick. And I think this brother wraps it up so beautifully. Let me just make sure that it's sharing the sound 1 second.
When we talk about Black history, if your parents or grandparents immigrated to the United States from anywhere that's considered to be the colored world, so Asia or Africa or South America, then most likely it happened after the 1960s. And the reason why that is because America didn't open up immigration to the colored world until public consciousness towards colored people changed. And that's after the civil rights struggle. And so our very presence in the United States is directly indebted to the African American community.
So I just think that that's really important to know, is that, and I'm pretty sure if some of you that, you're not a first or second or third generation who's been living in America, or if you know a little bit of historical context when it comes to America, we've had Irish immigrants come, we've had Italian immigrants come, and we've had Jewish immigrants come, and often they were the ones that were looked down upon. But no one ever really questions how come there wasn't this huge influx of South Asian or Asian or African immigrants until after the 1960s. Well, this is why. It's because any country of color was truly not accepted to have these large stream of immigrants come into the country. And so when the question is posed as to why is this important for me to know as a non-Black person of color, well, if Black people didn't make these strides here in America, it would have been a lot harder for you or for your grandparents or your parents who have come to this country. It wasn't open for everyone. It wasn't open for every country to come to America, to have these great opportunities. So we have to acknowledge the things that happened and the advancements that occurred in order to have this beautiful rainbow and this beautiful spectrum of cultures and ethnicities that we have here today. And so I just wanted to kind of highlight that, it's important because it's why, in a lot of ways, we could have these large influxes of immigrants coming in. And if it weren't for Black people striving during the civil rights, during Jim Crow, just making it out of their enslavement, we might not have been where we are today. A lot of your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents who immigrated here from other countries might not be here today. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the importance of exactly why it's important for you not only to know the history, but really celebrate it.
We talk about Black history.
So now that we're in 2021, what is Black History Month, right? Like, for some of you, you know the historical context. For some of you, you've gone above and beyond maybe what you learned in school. Maybe you've read some books. But what is Black History Month now that we're in 2021? I don't think any of you are oblivious to everything that occurred over the summer, all of the civil rights protests that were still going on. And while it's unfortunate that it was happening, we have to embrace the fact that it's happening. And so what was happening in the 60s and the 50s is still going on now in the 21st century. So the first thing is that when we talk about Black History Month in 2021 or in the 21st century, we need to understand the contributions Black people have made into the historical fabric that is the United States, often behind or included with any sort of major discoveries in the United States when it comes to any sort of aspect, whether it's art, technology, science, history. Often there are Black people that are there. Sometimes we weren't given a voice. Sometimes we weren't given the credit and the recognition, but often we were there. And sometimes we were there doing the discovery and we just weren't allowed to get credit for it. Another thing, number 2, is Black History Month in 2021 is learning more about systemic racism. How do you benefit from it? How are you dealing with it? How are you even dealing with it? You don't even know that you are under systemic racism. It's learning more about what it means to oppression. What does justice really mean? Is what is equity? And discovering what you can do to fight for equity and benefits for everyone. Because remember, when we benefit, you benefit. When you benefit, we benefit. Like, we all benefit each other. Like, we're all here together. We are all just trying to live in a space that's equitable and fair and just for everyone. And number 3, it's acknowledging Black agency, Black perseverance, and Black resistance. So acknowledging these wonderful things that Black people have brought to the United States, and realizing that not everything is gloom and doom. Not everything is a struggle. I mean, there's Black joy, there's Black love, there's Black art. And I think now, if you are, maybe you're unaware, you would like to get more information, there are so many amazing documentaries on right now, especially during this month. No matter what you're interested in, if you're interested in art, if you're interested in sculpting, if you're interested in painting, music, and then there movies that are coming out now, if you're a history buff, so many things going on now that can help you to learn more. And then the 4th thing is recognizing that Black people are still making and breaking barriers. Even now in the 21st century, we are still saying she was the first Black person to do this, he was the first Black person to do that. We are still in the process of making history. We made history last month with the first Black female vice president. So we have to acknowledge that history is still being made. And not only is history still being made, history is still being discovered. So when we acknowledge Black History Month, we have to acknowledge that it's still going on. It hasn't stopped, and it will continue. And to be exuberated about that. That is all that I have for you guys for today. I hope if you have any questions, please let me know, because we can take a couple questions. Is that fine with you, Dorothy?
Yes, absolutely. I would, I'm starving for engagement. So anyone who's on our Facebook sees that I'm watching live with you so that I can tend to your questions too. Anyone who was privileged enough to get the Zoom link, I don't want to babysit you. Go ahead, open your mic, open your camera, and let's engage. Let's ask questions. Let's talk about it, please. From what I see, Zubaidah, most of our viewers at this time are people who work in our organization. I see other educators. I see other social change agents. I see, if you're here from the top, you think that equity and fair and history and good things matter. So please open your mic and share with us.
While we're kind of waiting for the questions to come in, so for those of you that know me, I have children, all elementary school age. And as I said, I just don't talk it, I walk the walk. So I had my kids run upstairs and go grab some books that they learned from. So just to share for anyone that might be looking for additional information, this is a great book. It just highlights the achievements of Black women. And then this one too, it's called The Fierce 44. And again, same thing, it highlights the achievements of African Americans, and it's written in a very child-friendly It's a very child friendly, and the readability is for children. And then for any of you that may be looking for books for yourself, this is a great book, just highlighting exactly, not just for Black people of color. I think it's wonderful for everyone. It really highlights some things that we do that we don't even recognize that we do, because this is how we've grown up. Like anyone here who may have grown up and your parents told you to come home before the street lights come on, to understand exactly where that comes from. That wasn't just a coincidence that so many of our parents told us that, to understand exactly where that originated. And then for any of you in the medical field, this is a great book, Medical Apartheid, just explaining from a medical standpoint exactly what happens and what has happened in the African American or the Black community. And then this is a amazing book, stamped from the beginning, and same kind of concepts, just more of a historical perspective.
Hi, so I have a question.
Yes.
So I endorsed the stamped book from that you just showed. But I know PBS has a documentary out coming. It may have premiered like either this weekend or next weekend or something, but it's called The Black Church, and it's a PBS special across the nation. So I was wondering if you could maybe say a little bit about the role that the Black church had, maybe historically and kind of presently, as far as the community place to meet and kind of spread stories and things.
Okay. And thank you so much, Julia, for your question. So the Black church, it did play a very important role in the history of Black people. Often the way it started, though, was a little bit complex, to say the very least. The Bibles that were given to enslaved people often removed anything that denoted the idea of equity, anything that denoted any sort of information that said that you have rights, and anything that went against the narrative of enslaving people. And so often the church, and a lot of the things that are currently present in the church, are descendants from practices that happened during the enslavement of Black people. The church was often a meeting place, and often some of the songs that were sung had secret hidden messages. The church till this day is still widely accepted by Black people as a place of community. It's a place of fellowship. Often now we're seeing more and more, especially during the civil rights movement, we saw a lot of Black people convert to Islam. So then that became a place as well of community. I unfortunately have not seen this PBS special, so I don't want to speak on what I haven't seen, but that's just my limited knowledge of the church and its role in the Black community.
Great, thank you. I have a kind of follow-up question. So you spoke about the censorship of the Bibles. Did that censorship happen in like educational literature as well during those times, or was it mostly religious?
I'm not sure I follow your question.
So like the books and things that like they were educated with, were those censored as well in a similar direction, or were they allowed the same educational materials as like their other counterparts?
So, well, first we know that it was illegal for Black people to read during the enslavement of Black people. And then the Bibles that they were given, or the ones that were allowed to quote, read from the Bible, a lot of the chapters and passages were removed if they denoted the idea of freedom, if they denoted the idea of anything that went against being owned by a master or by an enslaver. And so those items were removed, and those items were not taught. So during that time, if you were to, let's say, get a Bible from an enslaved person and get one from a white American, and I could be wrong, so please don't quote me on this, but I want to say that there were like 60 some pages missing out of the one for enslaved people that was in the one for the white Americans. So anything that denoted uprising, anything like even some of the religious figures that, like for Moses, for example, where he stood up against Pharaoh, that story was removed. Does that answer your question, Julia? And I'm just kind of looking through the comments. I completely agree with your comment, Julia, where you said, I think Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks and such were civil rights heroes. They absolutely were. Like I said, I just think it's important that we not limit our knowledge to that, like to know that there was someone else before Rosa Parks who actually did the same thing, where she sat on the bus, to know that Rosa Parks didn't sit on the bus because she was a tired old woman, and it was an actual strategic thing that her and her organization decided to do, and she was chosen to take that step and to be that face for that movement. For Ayana, it says, where can we find the link to the video clip you showed? I actually found that on Instagram. I can send the video clip to Dorothy, and she should be able to hopefully send it out or share it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is Ayana. I'm so glad to be here. Hi, Dorothy. Yeah,
Dr.
it's on the
Cooper.
gram. Oh my gosh, I'm so old school. I don't have the gram, but please send me any links. I pretty much just try to navigate LinkedIn, which is where I found today's session. So thank you and glad to be here.
Good. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Cooper. All right, guys, if we don't have any more questions, if there's no more comments, we are going to allow you to get your first coffee. Let me check on Facebook really quick and make sure that there's nothing before we let you go to the gooses here. Is there anyone on Facebook who would like to say, share, or ask? Okay, I don't have anything here, so you're officially off the hook. Zubaidah, thank you so much for sharing with us. We hope to see you back at 3 o'clock because at 3 o'clock we are welcoming all of the speakers back for a larger panel session where if you don't engage and ask questions, you'll be removed from the room. It's like, no, but it's where we're gonna hopefully the energy I'm looking for, the vibe I'm looking for is just a chill out session where we can talk and discuss and share, situations or instances that we've been in and wanted to talk about that. So a no judgment zone, a safe zone of where we can all learn and share. Thank you again, guys, for joining our first session. We will see you back here, same exact link at, I know that we were running a little late. So back at 11 a.m. We are going to try our very, very hardest to start on time so that we can keep the day on time. Okay, so 11 a.m. We'll see you back here. Thank you again, guys, so much for joining us for our first session.